Homonationalism is a term coined by Jasbir Buar in her 2007 book Terrorist Assemblages. It describes the ways in which certain nations use discourses of LGBTQ rights and inclusion to position themselves as modern or progressive, while simultaneously reinforcing nationalist, xenophobic, and often Islamophobic agendas. Homonationalism connects the acceptance of certain LGBTQ identities to the politics of the nation state, creating a hierarchy where some groups are valorized as liberated and others are constructed as threats. Homonationalism highlights the intersection of sexuality, nationalism, and power. Nations often deploy gay rights as makers of modernity to contrast themselves against backward or oppressive societies. For instance, Western countries may emphasize their progressive laws supporting same sex marriage and LGBTQ protections while framing non Western countries as intolerant or barbaric. In this framework, LGBTQ inclusion becomes a tool of geopolitical and cultural dominance, serving both to justify foreign policy interventions and to bolster international nationalist narratives. Homonationalism is deeply intertwined with neoliberalism. Puar argues that the celebration of acceptable queer subjects, those who conform to normative ideas of citizenship, consumption, and respectability, coincides with economic and political agendas. For example, the good gay citizen is often envisioned as white, middle class, and aligned with state values. This creates a hierarchy of queer lives. Some LGBTQ people are embraced while others, particularly immigrants, people of color, or those challenging dominant social norms, remain marginalized or excluded. One of the consequences of homonationalism is the co optation of LGBTQ struggles for political ends. Rather than focusing on universal principles of equality or justice, homonationalist discourse selectively celebrates certain queer identities to reinforce existing power structures. This can include reinforcing borders, policing migration, or legitimizing military interventions under the guise of protecting queer populations abroad. For instance, Puar discusses how post 9/11 US policies framed LGBTQ rights rhetorically to justify the invasion of countries like Iraq or Afghanistan, portraying intervention as a moral duty to liberate oppressed queer populations. Another important aspect is the internal policing of queer communities. Homonationalism often valorizes assimilationist models of queer life, that is, those that adapt heteronormative institutions like marriage, military service, or corporate careers, while dismissing or marginalizing more radical or non-conforming expressions of sexuality. This creates tension within LGBTQ movements as the pursuit of state recognition sometimes comes at the cost of broader social justice or solidarity with more marginalized queer groups. Homonationalism is also connected to affective and cultural narratives. States and media deploy images of victimized, exoticized queer people abroad to generate fear, justify intervention, and mobilize nationalist sentiment at home. Domestic queer subjects are presented as proof of the nation's moral progress, contributing to a sense of national pride and superiority. Homonationalism describes the entanglement of queer politics with nationalism, neoliberalism, and global hierarchies. It highlights how states and societies can simultaneously celebrate LGBTQ inclusion while marginalizing others, using the politics of sexuality to reinforce power, justify intervention, and create hierarchies of belonging. Understanding homonationalism is essential for critically engaging with contemporary queer politics. globalization, and the ways in which rights can be selectively deployed for ideological ends.